Former football star George Weah is elected as Liberia's next president. We'll have a live update from Monrovia. Reviewing U.S. President Donald Trump's foreign policy departures of 2017. And a Nigerian contortionist bends and hops his way into the record books. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We begin tonight in Egypt, where 12 people have died in twin attacks on Coptic Christians south of Cairo. In the first assault, 10 people were killed when gunmen tried to storm the Maramina church in Halwan city, but were intercepted by police. About an hour later, a Coptic-owned shop in the same area was hit, leaving 2 people dead. More than 100 Christians have been killed in Egypt in the past year. The local branch of the so-called Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for most of the attacks. Security forces have put checkpoints in place around the capital in response to the attacks. Media reports say Friday's attack appears to have taken place when police patrolling the church noticed 2 men behaving suspiciously. They approached the men who began firing. 3 police officers were among the dead. Several people are believed to have been wounded, 2 critically. Now, Liberian Vice President Joseph Boakai on Friday has conceded the presidential race to former football star George Weah after Weah garnered 61% of the vote based on more than 98% of the ballot cast. Weah's supporters, mostly young, celebrated into the night Thursday after Liberia's Electoral Commission declared him the winner of Tuesday's election. Weah previously won international acclaim as a footballer with several top European clubs. Here's what one Weah supporter had to say about the new president-elect.
He is the first, I can say, in the history of Liberia that gave back to Liberia before he vowed for the presidency. And that effort is not wasted because we went to the junkos, the ghettos, the towns, the villages, sleep on hungry stomach because we wanted to rewrite history. Because that young man who came from Gibraltar, devour all odds and become successful, he stands as a great inspiration to we the young people of this nation.
Joseph Boakai's concession avoids any kind of protracted legal challenge that followed the first round of the election and delayed the runoff by more than a month.
A while ago, I called Ambassador George Manuel Weah of the Coalition for Democratic Change to congratulate him as the winner in the presidential contest.
Weah will replace President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who is stepping down after 2 terms, the maximum allowed under Liberia's constitution. Weah's victory represents Liberia's first peaceful and democratic transfer of power in more than 70 years. Now, for the latest on George Weah's convincing win, let's go to Liberia, where James Butty, managing editor of VOA's Daybreak Africa radio program, joins me by phone from Monrovia. Good evening, James.
Good evening, Vincent, and good evening to all your viewers around Africa.
Yes, and we have to say this is such a sweet victory for Weah. What really made him tick, and particularly with the young people, the youth of Liberia?
Well, first of all, let me say that as we speak, the Elections Commission is about to officially declare Weah the winner. A news conference is scheduled any moment from now. Ever since the first preliminary results were announced yesterday, there's been widespread jubilation throughout the city of Monrovia among George Weah's supporters, and they continue unabated. In fact, we are told by the youth leader of the Coalition for Democratic Change, the George Weah Coalition, that they have declared a 21-day celebration of this victory.
Yes.
Particularly, you asked about the youth. As the piece you just played show, the youth of this country look up to George Weah to bring the necessary help that they need. This country is majority youth, and most of the people, most of the youth here are unemployed, and they look up to George Weah to deliver them.
Now, you know that, when you look at the combination of Weah and the vice president, you see Charles Taylor's shadow behind there. Was that of no concern to others in Liberia?
To some here, the as you know, George Weah's vice presidential candidate, Joa Howard Taylor, is the former wife of Charles Taylor. To some here, they felt that we have made a mistake by bringing on Joa Howard Taylor, and even by admitting that he has at some time met or talked to Charles Taylor. But to many here, remember that Charles Taylor was a former leader, as a guerrilla leader. He had his own headquarters in the county of Bond County. And that's where Joa Howard Taylor is a senator.
Yeah.
So people there still revere Charles Taylor. So for the fact that George Weah carried Bond County, it means that the people there really like Charles Taylor. They don't have an impact.
Yeah,
people on the international side probably may be thinking otherwise.
Very, very quickly, how about the issue of experience? Many have worried that maybe he doesn't have the kind of experience needed for the task ahead.
That is a question that was used during the campaign, that some people say at first Weah wasn't educated and that he lacked the experience. The argument, I did talk with him, I think you've seen, I interviewed Weah just on election day,
Yep.
and he said that you don't need the experience a lot to be the leader. Leadership is not about just experience. It's a whole a combination of a whole lot.
Okay, James, so, we'll be observing.
That's what people. Yes.
Yeah, we'll be observing in the coming days. James, I want to thank you very much. James Butty, Managing Editor of Viewers Daybreak Africa radio program, reporting live from Monrovia. Now, to some of Africa's top political stories of 2017, an unprecedented court ruling saw Kenyan voters go to the polls twice this year, while yet to be held elections in Congo saw political uncertainty as thousands marched in Togo, calling for an end to the 50-year rule of the Nsigbe family. It was an election year like no African nation had ever seen, as Kenya went to the polls twice in 2017. President Uhuru Kenyatta sought a second term as his rival Raila Odinga assured his supporters that he would take office after elections on August the 8th. The result, which gave Kenyatta a close win, sparked protests in which at least 33 people died during a police crackdown on opposition supporters. Odinga called the process a sham and petitioned the result at the Supreme Court. The rerun on October 26 was boycotted by the opposition, who questioned the independence of the Electoral Commission, found to have bungled the first vote to run the second. Kenyatta was declared winner again, but analysts said the prolonged election season would have far-reaching political and economic effects. In Congo, 43 million voters registered to vote for an election that had originally been scheduled for late 2016. The delays triggered unrest and fueled increasing militia violence and lawlessness in Congo's east and center, raising fears the Central African nation could slip back into the conflicts that killed millions around the turn of the century. Congo's Electoral Commission announced in November that the long-awaited poll to replace President Joseph Kabila will take place on December 23, 2018. Opposition leaders reacted furiously to the new dates, saying Kabila lost his constitutional mandate in 2016. In Southern Africa, Zambian opposition leader Hakainde Hichilema was arrested with 5 others in April and charged with treason after his convoy failed to make way for President Edgar Lungu's motorcade. The case heightened political friction in Zambia, seen as one of Africa's most stable democracies. Hichilema was freed from prison in August after state prosecutor dropped charges of plotting to overthrow the government, but a judge warned him he could be arrested again at any time. In West Africa, mass protests erupted in Togo as calls for the removal of President Faure Nsigbe intensified. Opposition activists started demonstrating in August against Nsigbe's refusal to give a clear date for stepping aside and opening up political space, the only country in West Africa that still does not accept presidential term limits. In Cameroon, the internet was switched back on in April after more than 3 months. The country's English-speaking regions say the government shut down the internet in a bid to crush dissent after protests broke out last year against alleged marginalization of these areas by French-speaking authorities. Tech entrepreneurs in the Anglophone northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon had to travel over 30 kilometers every day to access the internet, a lifeline for many youth in a country that has earned the name Silicon Mountain for its digital economy potential. Despite the internet being back, a political crisis remains in Cameroon's Anglophone regions. Dozens of civilians have been killed in unrest that has fueled support for separatists seeking an independent state. Some separatists have launched armed attacks on state forces, creating the most serious challenge to President Paul Biya's 35-year rule. Thousands of English speakers have fled across the border into neighboring Nigeria. Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now, coming up, closer look at President Donald Trump's unconventional foreign policy decisions. Stay with us. Egypt and its northern African neighbors are facing significant terror threats, economic pressures, and political uncertainty as a year of regional turmoil draws to a close and a rocky future looms on the horizon. Edward Eryan in Cairo reviews 2017 and takes a look at what may lie ahead in 2018.
Egypt suffered a series of major terror attacks against civilian and military targets in 2017, causing significant loss of life and economic damage. As the Islamic State group crumbles, analysts predict more violence to come.
Because the so-called Islamic Caliphate is collapsing in Syria and Iraq, we will then see, a massive return of some of these jihadists who would be able to penetrate within the communities of North Africa.
Both Tunisian and Egyptian security forces have battled Islamic militants infiltrating from neighboring Libya, a cauldron of political chaos and terrorism. Rival Libyan governments have complicated the already thorny security situation across vast swaths of the country and its porous border. Analysts say a political solution is key.
Libya, which is very strategic within that region, that acts some kind of like a bridge between that region of North Africa and Central Africa, part of areas like Mali, Chad, Niger, and then towards the Mediterranean in Europe. If we still have this kind of instability within Libya, then it would be difficult, for most of these North African countries to be able to deal effectively with the situation.
With 95 million people, Egypt is the Arab world's most populous country, and its security and economic situation affects both the Middle East and North Africa. A troubled economy represents a huge risk.
The GDP is not rising, no sources of revenue have been created, and tourism has not picked up.
A big hurdle for Egypt in 2018 will be the presidential elections happening amid a bitter divide between Islamists and liberals who are not necessarily on the side of incumbent President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
On the political front, clearly there is no reconciliation happening in the country. The division is becoming very clear.
Algeria, the Arab world's second largest country, also faces political and security challenges in 2018, as many expect incumbent President Abdelaziz Bouteflika to run for a fifth term. Like Egypt, Algeria has a large population of young people who feel they have no say in their future. Providing jobs for them, analysts say, is the most serious challenge facing regional leaders in 2018.
You have North Africa, which has a growing population of young people who are disenfranchised, young people who are unemployed. So we have to be looking towards building capacity, towards looking at prevent programs within communities.
Analysts say if regional governments do not find solutions to the increasing droves of unemployed young people, the ongoing tragedy of refugees trying to flee by sea to Europe is likely to get worse, threatening the stability of Europe and the likelihood of more lives lost at sea. Edward Uranian for VOA News, Cairo.
Since taking office in January, U.S. President Donald Trump has broken with foreign policy of his predecessor by recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, refusing to certify Iran's compliance with the nuclear deal, pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, and taking a more aggressive stance toward North Korea. VOA's Mariama Diallo has more on the views of Trump's foreign policy departures.
It is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
It was an announcement that took many by surprise.
There is no alternative to the two-state solution. There is no plan B.
President Donald Trump's move, which unleashed protest, was a reversal of long-standing U.S. policy that Jerusalem's status must be decided by negotiation. It was also an example of how he's broken with former President Barack Obama.
This is the nature of the Trump presidency. It's not conventional. It's not always policy-based.
On North Korea, the Iran nuclear deal, the Paris Climate Change Agreement, Trump has moved the U.S. in a different direction.
You've seen that very clearly with regard to the war against ISIS in both Iraq and Syria. And ISIS has nearly been wiped out, actually, in both of those countries. You're seeing that with regard to North Korea, where there's a much more proactive, aggressive approach. Also on the Iran front as well.
While this forceful approach is what Trump promised his supporters, some critics say complicated situations like Iran require the diplomatic tool.
In the 70 years since the end of World War II, America has relied on two key tools for its security and standing in the world. One has been the strength of its diplomacy, and the other has been the strength of its armed forces. You're taking one of the tools off the table, the diplomatic tools, without really putting a well thought through and crafted policy as an alternative.
The United States will withdraw.
President Trump's other big break with his predecessor was in June, when he withdrew from the Paris Climate Change Agreement, making the United States the only country to reject the global pact.
To move away from the Paris Accord on climate without anything to replace it is, a step back 10 years rather than looking at where we're going to be as a society and as an economy 10 years plus.
Despite this move, other observers say Trump has made fewer foreign policy changes than many expected based on his campaign rhetoric.
This is actually quite a traditional U.S. foreign policy approach, in that President Trump clearly rejects the idea of isolationism. Many analysts thought that this administration would be isolationist, that you would see America turning away from the world. You haven't seen that at all.
Disruptor or traditionalist, Trump's foreign policy moves are likely to keep adversaries and allies vigilant and even wary as the president enters his second year in office. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. What is this man doing? Breaking a world record. We'll be right back.
In Egypt, 2 gunmen stormed a Coptic Christian church south of Cairo, killing at least 9 people, including 3 police officers, with 1 attacker shot dead. In Liberia, former FIFA World Player of the Year George Weah has been elected the country's new president as the West African nation faces its first democratic transfer of power in more than 70 years. We stay in Liberia, where presidential candidate and current Liberia Vice President Joseph Boakai congratulates his opponent on winning the presidential election. The South African Constitutional Court rules that Parliament failed to hold President Jacob Zuma to account over a scandal related to state-funded upgrades to his home.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. What a year in African cinema. This year marked 10 years since the death of Ousmane Sembène, a self-taught Senegalese filmmaker who is considered by many as the father of African cinema. A documentary film about his life and work was screened in close to 40 countries in Africa. Africa's biggest film festival, the Pan-African Film and Television Festival of Ouagadougou, showcased an unprecedented 1,000 productions by directors across Africa despite security concerns. Meanwhile, Kenya's film industry has seen a revival in recent years. The newly launched NBO Film Festival aims to boost that growth. And whether it's a welterweight or heavyweight, boxing is a high-intensity sport not usually associated with pensioners until now. A group of Johannesburg grandmothers are showing age is no obstacle to stepping into the ring. These ladies are members of the A-Team Gym, a group of grannies who are now hitting the punching bags here twice a week. Landing jabs and uppercuts, though, isn't why the women are here. Numerous studies, including research commissioned by the American Heart Association, shows aerobic exercise is beneficial in lowering blood pressure, reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes and heart disease. And that's what's trending today. Now, he is known to Nigerians as D-Flex for his ability to twist and stretch his body. He has already broken the Guinness World Record as a contortionist. Africa 54's Estigido Ewart with the story of Oyendamola Emmanuel.
He is only 23 years old, but D-Flex is no ordinary Nigerian. On December 16th, he managed 142 skips in 1 minute with one leg behind his ear, beating a record set by American Bria Roberts in 2016, who skipped 35 times in 1 minute.
1, let's do this.
Oyendamola's popularity rose in 2013 after participating in the Nigeria's Got Talent show, where he made it to the top 10. But his win was not easy. It took him more than 1 year of twisting and stretching his body to get in shape.
First of all, I just broke the Guinness World Record of most skips with one leg behind the head. The current record was 35, and I did 142 skips in 1 minute. So I feel very excited and happy. I feel blessed because it's been a journey for me, and accomplishing this is like everything to me. I'm very, very happy. I'm very excited.
Contortion is an art that requires phenomenal flexibility and strength. Oyendamola says he spends an hour every day stretching and coming up with new tricks.
D-Flex is amazing. Like, anyone that knows D-Flex knows how amazing she is. I didn't even doubt that I was going to break this record. I mean, knowing from the crazy stuff he already does, skipping one leg behind your neck, the other, mad.
And Oyendamola is often misunderstood.
Contortion is not something you see a lot in Nigeria. It's very rare and people don't really appreciate it. But we just hope that this actually helps him and just pushes him further.
The young contortionist, who holds a diploma in mass communications, says he first noticed his ability when he was 13 years old. He adds some Nigerians have linked the art form to witchcraft.
When I do this, people give different reactions. Some get scared, some get very terrified, and some don't even want to watch. For example, my mom, she never wants to see me do this. She never wants to see me because she's always scared, like I don't know what you're doing, but don't just kill yourself. I don't want to watch you, just get out.
Oyindamola is yet to receive a certificate for his entry into the 2017 Guinness World Records book. He hopes to build an international career that will see him travel and perform abroad, as well as train aspiring contortionists in the future. Astegido Ewart, VOA News, Washington.
Simply amazing. We're our show today with Abiro. This is a song by Kenyan singer, songwriter, and guitarist Winyo, featuring our very own Heather Maxwell, host of VOA's Music Time in Africa. From all of us in Washington, have a good night and stay safe in the countdown to 2018.
Passing through Mombasa, they saw my Sherry passing through Nairobi, they saw my baby passing through Nakuru. Ooh, my traveling fool.
Welcome to English in a Minute. When something loses its original shape or form, it does not look very natural or comfortable.
Bent out of shape.
Hey, did you tell Greg about my dinner party?
Yeah, I did. I thought he was invited.
Well, now he's all bent out of shape because I didn't invite him.
I'm sorry.